There comes a moment in one's spiritual journey when the whole weight of outward seeking begins to dissolve, not because one has found all the answers in the world, but because one begins to sense, sometimes faintly, sometimes with great force, that the answers were never in the world at all. We spend years, even lifetimes, believing that peace is to be found in better circumstances, that safety lies in stronger defenses, that healing is the result of manipulating matter and improving conditions. And yet, as many of you have discovered, the more we look outward, the more the heart is left untouched. Something in us begins to whisper, there must be another way. And indeed there is, but it is not a way found in books or rituals or in the opinions of men. It is a way discovered only through a turning within. The Master revealed this inner path in the simplest, most misunderstood statement in all of spiritual teaching: I am. Those two words, unadorned, unqualified, pure, carry within them the entire secret of spiritual life. Not I am something, not I am becoming, not I hope to be, but simply I am. For in those words, spoken without attachment to person, there is a recognition that the life we have called mine was never personal life at all, but the infinite, expressing itself as individual being. Joel Goldsmith spent his earthly years pointing students back to this simple recognition, teaching that God is not something we reach for, nor a power we invite into our affairs, but the very essence of our own identity. And so this 7-day practice we are embarking upon is not a method, nor a discipline, nor a way to change conditions. It is not an attempt to add truth to the mind or to secure blessings from a distant deity. No, it is a gentle, quiet returning to the source that has never been absent. Practicing the presence is not thinking about God, nor is it praying to God. It is the recognition that the presence is already the life of your being, and that all fear, all lack, all discord arise only when we forget this and identify ourselves with the passing shadows of this world. For the next 7 days, our aim is simple: to make room in consciousness for the awareness of the infinite. Just a crack in the door is enough. A brief pause in the stream of thought, a moment of inner stillness, a quiet acknowledgement of the I that lives itself as you. This is all that is required. As you take these steps, not with strain, but with receptivity, you will find that life begins to unfold from within, and the burdens you once carried begin to lighten, not because they have been solved by human effort, but because you no longer carry them as a personal self. Let us begin this journey, then, not as seekers striving toward a distant goal, but as those who are awakening to what has always been true. Rest for a moment in the awareness that the I which hears these words is not the limited person you have believed yourself to be, but the presence itself, eternal, inexhaustible, whole. From this recognition, everything that needs to unfold will unfold, and everything that needs to fall away will fall away, all without your striving. Simply be willing to let the next 7 days reveal what has forever been your own identity. It must be understood from the very beginning that truth, in and of itself, does not transform. If truth alone brought freedom, then anyone who has ever read a scripture or listened to a sermon would walk in perpetual peace. Yet we know this is not so. There are multitudes who can recite profound statements, who can argue theology, who can repeat spiritual principles, and still they suffer, still they fear, still they struggle. And the reason is simple. Truth known with the mind is not truth realized in consciousness. There is an immeasurable difference between the intellectual grasp of spiritual ideas and the living experience of the presence that those ideas point to. We are not on this path to accumulate concepts. We are not here to improve the mind's storehouse of beliefs. The mind, no matter how educated or well-informed, can never reveal God. It can never grasp infinity. It can only produce images, opinions, and memories. But the presence we seek is not of the mind. It is the very essence of being. And so, if we wish to experience God not as a theory, not as a hope, but as the living reality of our own existence, then we must allow consciousness itself to be transformed. This is why practice is necessary. Not to make truth true, but to make truth alive. You may say, but I already know that God is within, or I already know that I am spiritual. Yes, you may know it, but if the slightest disturbance in the outer world can unsettle your peace, then the knowing has not yet become realization. If the news of the world can frighten you, if the actions of others can anger you, if the body's sensations can dominate your thought, then you are still living from the personal sense of self. And the personal self, no matter how spiritual its language may sound, will always be vulnerable, always be striving, always be seeking somewhere outside itself for what already lies within. Practice, therefore, is not an effort to bring God into our experience. It is the gentle dissolving of all that obscures the awareness of the presence that is already here. Practice is not an attempt to become spiritual. It is the noticing that we have mistakenly believed ourselves to be something other than spirit. Practice is not a discipline imposed upon a reluctant mind. It is the quiet, joyful turning from the noise of the world to the stillness where truth is realized. Even a moment of true recognition, a moment in which the mind falls silent and the feeling of presence rises, does more to transform consciousness than a lifetime of repeating spiritual phrases. And so we practice not through force, but through willingness, not through ritual, but through receptivity, not to change God, but to yield to God. As we move through the days ahead, you will find that each practice serves a single purpose: to shift your identity from the personal I, which suffers, fears, and struggles, to the infinite I, which is the very life of God expressing as you. When this shift begins, even faintly, something changes. Fear loses its foundation. Lack begins to dissolve. Loneliness softens into presence. And you realize that you have not invited God into your life. You have awakened to the fact that God is your life. This is why we practice, not to attain anything, but to awaken. Before we enter into the specific practices of our 7 days, we must pause for a deeper understanding of what it truly means to practice the presence. For if we misunderstand this foundation, we will reduce the most sacred opening of consciousness to a technique, a ritual, or an attempt to manipulate the outer world. And nothing could be further from the intent of these teachings. Practicing the presence does not mean affirming statements in order to make them true. It does not mean visualizing conditions until they conform to our desires. It does not mean persuading God to act on our behalf, nor does it mean achieving a higher state of mind through willpower or concentration. All of these approaches assume that God is separate from us, that the divine must be summoned or invoked, and that we must make something happen by the activity of thought. But in spiritual truth, God is already the life of your being, and no thought can bring God closer or push God away. The presence is not something to reach for, it is what you already are. The presence is not a power to harness, it is the only power there is. The presence is not a distant deity to appease, it is the I that hears these words. When we practice the presence, we are not adding anything to ourselves. We are letting go of everything that is not ourselves. We are not trying to create harmony. We are noticing that harmony is already the nature of divine being. We are not attempting to free ourselves from fear. We are relaxing out of the false identity that fears. We are not striving to become spiritual. We are recognizing that spirit is the reality of our existence, whether we know it or not. Joel Goldsmith often reminded his students that the presence does not respond to words, thoughts, or formulas. The presence reveals itself in the silence of inner receptivity, when the personal sense of self loosens its grip and we become willing to let God be God. This willingness is the heart of practice, not effort willingness, not strain openness, not command surrender. To practice the presence is to sit quietly, even for a few seconds, with the recognition that there is a life within you that is not dependent upon the world, a life that was never born and will never die, a life that needs no improvement, no protection, no defense, a life that is whole, complete, and utterly free, a life that is expressing as you, yet is not confined to your personality, your story, your history, or your conditions. When you turn your attention inward and become aware even faintly of this living presence, something shifts. The personal I, with all its fears and demands, begins to fade. And the infinite I, the Christ of your own being, begins to shine through. This is not a mystical event reserved for a few. It is the natural state of every soul when it ceases to identify with the world's appearance and returns to the truth of its source. Therefore, as you move through these 7 days, remember, you are not practicing to make something happen. You are practicing to stop interfering with what is already happening. You are not practicing to bring God into your affairs. You are practicing to recognize that there is no place where the presence is not. You are not practicing to improve the outer life. You are practicing to awaken to the inner life that governs the outer effortlessly. This is the foundation. With this understanding, the simplest pause becomes a doorway into infinity, and the faintest recognition of I am becomes the seed of realization. Everything that follows in the coming days rests upon this sacred truth. God is the eye of your being, and practicing the presence is the remembrance of that fact. On this first day, we begin with the simplest and yet most transformative of all spiritual practices, a brief, gentle pause. Do not underestimate the power of this. It is not merely a break in activity, it is a doorway through which you step out of the hypnotism of the personal self and into the awareness of the infinite presence. And you will discover that the smallest opening in consciousness, the tiniest moment of stillness, carries more spiritual potency than hours spent thinking about truth. During this day, I ask only that you pause 2 or 3 times each hour. No technique, no formula, no recitation. Simply pause. Let the breath be natural. Let the shoulders release. Let the mind do whatever it wishes to do. And then, in that moment of stillness, turn inward and gently ask, who is aware right now? Do not try to answer the question. Do not search the mind for explanation. Simply rest in the question itself. In that pause, something remarkable occurs. The personal I, the one made of memory and tension, the one that believes itself to be responsible for everything, loses its authority. It softens. It loosens. It becomes transparent. And through that opening, the deeper I, the spiritual I, begins to make itself known. Not through words, not through visions, not through sensation, but through a quiet sense of presence, a stillness that was always there but rarely noticed. This pause is the beginning of liberation from the tyranny of thought. For every fear begins as a thought, Every worry begins as a thought. Every judgment, every impulse, every story you tell about yourself begins as a thought. If you can pause, even for a few seconds, and observe the mind rather than identify with it, a great truth reveals itself. You are not the mind. You are the awareness in which the mind appears. You are the presence that witnesses the coming and going of thoughts without being touched by them. Joel Goldsmith taught that the mind is not a tool for finding God. The mind is the veil that obscures God. When you pause, the veil thins. When you pause, you step out of the stream of thinking and into the stillness where truth is realized. The pause is therefore not an interruption of your spiritual life. It is the spiritual life. It is the moment in which you return from the world of appearances to the inner kingdom where all harmony, all peace, all supply already exist. As you practice this today, you will notice something subtle but unmistakable. The pause begins to interrupt the habitual reactions of the personal self. A moment of irritation arises. Pause. A fear about the future appears. Pause. A judgment about yourself or another forms. Pause. In each pause, you quietly step back and remember, the I that is aware of this is not disturbed. The I that is aware of this is not afraid. The I that is aware of this is the presence itself. Do not expect fireworks. Do not expect revelations. Simply pause. Let the rest unfold of its own accord. For in the pause, even if it lasts only a breath, you touch the edge of freedom. You begin to sense that the true I, the I that Jesus spoke of, the I that Goldsmith devoted his life to revealing, is not the anxious self you have been trying to fix, but the eternal self that needs no fixing at all. Let today be the day you learn to stop for a moment and return to your own being. Let today be the beginning of living not as a person in the world, but as the presence observing the world. One moment at a time, one pause at a time, you are stepping back into the truth of what you are. On this second day, we turn to one of the most sacred disciplines in the entire spiritual path, the watching of the words, I am. For in all of Scripture, in all of mystical teaching, no phrase carries greater significance or greater creative power. When Moses sought the name of the infinite, the answer was not a doctrine, not a philosophy, but this: I am that I am. When the Master spoke, he did not describe God as something separate from himself. He spoke from the divine center. I am the way. I am the life. I am the light of the world. And Joel Goldsmith spent his life revealing that these words were not personal claims, but universal truth. The I that speaks is the presence of God itself. Yet how casually the world uses this sacred name, how unknowingly we attach it to fear, to limitation, to lack, to conditions that have no reality in the kingdom of spirit. I am sick. I am lonely. I am failing. I am not enough. And with each of these statements, we unknowingly bind the infinite to the finite, the eternal to the temporary, the perfect to the imperfect, not in truth, but in our experience. For whatever we associate with the words I am becomes the identity through which we live. Today's practice is simple. You will watch your use of I am, not with judgment, not with condemnation, but with quiet awareness. Whenever you hear yourself say I am, followed by a condition, I am tired, I am worried, I am behind, I am overwhelmed, pause. Let the words echo within you, and gently recognize these are not true of the I that I am. These are statements about a passing appearance, not about the life that witnesses the appearance. Do not try to correct the statement quickly. Do not rush to replace it with something positive. Instead, rest for a moment in the recognition that the I which observes the condition is not the condition. The I that says, "I am tired," is the infinite aware of a temporary sensation. The I that says, "I am lacking," is the infinite witnessing a passing belief in limitation. The I is never tired. The I is never lacking. The I is never afraid. The I is the presence of God. As you observe this throughout the day, you will begin to see how unconsciously you have been affirming the false identity. You will notice how often you have spoken as though the body were the self, as though the emotions were the self, as though circumstances had power over the self. And each time you notice this, something quiet begins to awaken, the recognition that your true identity cannot be defined by the world's conditions. At the end of each observation, let a gentle inner correction arise, not an affirmation, not a forced statement, but a recognition. The I that I am is infinite presence. The I that I am is untouched. The I that I am is whole. Let this recognition be soft, unhurried, without strain. You are not trying to change anything. You are reclaiming the sacred name of your being. You are acknowledging that the I which watches the mind, the I which notices the emotions, is the same I that Jesus spoke from, the same I that is the life, substance, and activity of God. As you do this, slowly, quietly, your sense of identity will shift. The burden begins to lift, not because conditions have changed, but because you are no longer identifying the infinite with the finite. You are withdrawing the power you once gave to appearances. You are standing in the truth of your being. Let this day be a day of sacred awareness. Every time you speak, "I am," pause, feel the holiness of that phrase, and let it remind you that the true I, the only I, is the presence of God expressing as your individual consciousness. This is the beginning of freedom from the false self, the beginning of living from the Christ within. On this third day, we take a step deeper into the heart of the spiritual life. For now, we are no longer merely observing the misuse of the sacred name. We are beginning to rest in the truth of that name itself, to sense, even faintly, the impersonal I. That is the foundation of all spiritual realization. This is the day in which we begin to taste the difference between thinking about God and resting in God, between knowing that I am is divine and sensing the living reality of that truth within ourselves. Set aside 10 minutes, morning, midday, and evening. Sit quietly, without urgency, without expectation. Let the mind be whatever it wishes to be. Let the body relax. Let the world go its own way. And then, in that sacred stillness, gently bring your attention to the simple recognition, "I am." Do not add anything to it. Do not complete the sentence. Do not qualify or interpret it. Just rest in the bare awareness of being. What you will begin to notice is subtle but profoundly important. As you rest in I am, you will discover that this I is not the personal sense of self that you have habitually identified as me. It is not the one with opinions, memories, likes, dislikes, fears, or ambitions. It is not the one who worries about tomorrow or regrets yesterday. The personal sense of self may still be present, but as you remain quiet, you begin to sense that it is something you observe, not something you are. The I that you rest in is impersonal, infinite, silent, and free. It was present before thought appeared, and it remains after thought subsides. It does not change with circumstance nor does it rise or fall with emotion. It simply is. This recognition is the beginning of Christ consciousness. Not a vision, not an experience, not a dramatic event, but the quiet awareness that the I of you is not the personal self you have been trying to repair. The I of you is the same I that lived as Jesus, the same I that breathed as the prophets and mystics, the same I that is the life of every individual on earth. It is the presence, individualized, yet never divided. As you sit in this awareness, you may notice that the mind attempts to pull you back into language. I am peaceful. I am loved. I am one with God. Do not fight these thoughts, but gently release them. Even the most beautiful spiritual thought is still a thought, and our purpose today is to return to the pure awareness of being, where words cannot enter and concepts lose their grip. The more deeply you rest in I am, the more you will begin to sense that this awareness is not located in the body. It does not begin behind the eyes or end at the skin. It has no boundary, no shape, no form. It is everywhere and nowhere. It fills the room and extends beyond it. It contains the world, yet is untouched by the world. This is why Joel Goldsmith often said that God is the eye of your being. For this innermost eye, the one that cannot be seen, cannot be grasped, cannot be defined, is the presence that lives itself as you. Let this day be a day of resting, not striving, not seeking, not reaching, just resting. For in the resting, the personal sense of self grows quiet, and the infinite begins to shine through. You will not make this happen. You will simply allow it. And as you continue this gentle practice, you will discover that the more you rest in the impersonal I, the more life flows harmoniously, effortlessly, and without conflict. Not because you have controlled anything, but because you have ceased to interfere. Today, do not try to achieve spiritual realization. Instead, let realization reveal itself. Let the I that you truly are rise into awareness. Let the silence speak. Let the stillness be its own fulfillment. For the I am is not something you become. It is what you have always been. On this fourth day, we enter a realm of practice that many students overlook. Yet without it, no one can come into the fullness of spiritual realization. Up to this point, we have been turning inward, discovering the impersonal I that is the life of our being, but now we must extend this recognition outward. For the presence that animates us is the same presence that animates every individual we meet. Until this truth becomes the basis of our seeing, we will continue to experience conflict, fear, and separation. And where there is separation, there can be no true realization. As you move through this day, every person becomes your spiritual opportunity, whether you speak to them or merely pass them on the street, whether you approve of them or feel resistance toward them, whether they inspire affection or stir discomfort. Pause and quietly recognize this one, too, is the I am, not their behavior, not their personality, not their history, beliefs, or actions, but the same divine presence, the same infinite life, the same Christ identity that is the truth of your own being. For there is only one I, appearing as many forms, and when you look upon another through the lens of personal sense, you deny the truth of your own self. This recognition is not sentimental, it is not moral, it is not an attempt to force yourself into kindness or forgiveness, it is a spiritual act. It is the beholding of reality where the world presents only appearance. Joel Goldsmith often reminded students that we cannot know the Christ of ourselves while denying it in others. The moment we judge another by their human characteristics, we have slipped back into the false identity. The moment we react to another's behavior, we have forgotten that the world of appearances is not the realm of truth. So today, notice when judgment arises. and it will arise. Notice when criticism forms in the mind, it will form. Notice when irritation appears, when impatience surfaces, when an old story about someone returns. And in that very moment, do not fight the reaction, simply pause. Let the reaction be exactly what it is, and then recognize this reaction belongs to the personal sense. The I that I am is not offended, and the I that they are is untouched. As this recognition deepens, you will begin to see something extraordinary. The people who once troubled you will no longer have the power to disturb your peace, not because they have changed, but because you are no longer relating to their appearance. You are seeing the presence behind the appearance. You are seeing the Christ instead of the mask. This seeing is healing for you and for them. You may encounter someone whose actions are hurtful, someone whose behavior is unkind or unconscious. The world will tell you that this is cause for anger, fear, or defensiveness. But the spiritual life invites another response. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Not as a prayer for their correction, but as a recognition that all harmful action arises from ignorance of one's true identity. And if they knew themselves as the I am, they could not act in discord, for the nature of the I am is harmony. Do not misunderstand. Recognizing the Christ in another does not mean allowing misuse, nor does it mean abandoning wisdom or boundaries. This recognition simply means that you no longer grant reality to the appearance. You see beyond it. You know the truth. And because you know the truth, you react not from fear, but from presence. Let this day be a day of sacred seeing. Let every face you encounter remind you of the one life expressing in infinite form. Let every conversation be an opportunity to behold the presence, even if silently, even if only for a moment, and you will discover a profound secret. When you recognize the I am in another, your own realization deepens, for there is only one I being recognized. As you practice this, the sense of isolation begins to dissolve. Loneliness fades, not because you are surrounded by people, but because you are recognizing the one self appearing as many. Judgment softens, fear loosens, and the heart becomes spacious enough to hold the world without resistance. For the world you see is the world you perceive through the eyes of the I am. And when you behold the Christ everywhere, the Christ becomes the reality of your own experience. Having spent the first 4 days turning inward, watching the sacred name, resting in the impersonal I, and beholding the Christ in all, we now come to the final movement of our 7-day journey, the unfolding of the presence in the practical affairs of daily living. For truth realized within must eventually express without, not as manipulated conditions nor as human achievement, but as the natural harmony of a consciousness aligned with its source. These next 3 days devoted to health, to supply, and to guidance are not new practices so much as deeper recognitions of what has already begun to reveal itself. Day 5. Health, the I, that I am cannot be sick. On this 5th day, we turn our attention to the realm of health, not to change the body, not to fight symptoms, not to battle disease, but to recognize that the body is not the seat of your identity. The body is an instrument, a vehicle through which the infinite lives its life in the world of form, and like any instrument, it reflects the quality of the consciousness that governs it. As you move through this day, whenever any sensation appears, discomfort, fatigue, tension, or even fear of illness, pause. Become aware, not of the sensation, but of the one who is aware of it. Bring your attention gently to the recognition. The I that I am is not in the body is in the I. This is not denial. This is not pretending. This is spiritual fact. The body may express harmony or disharmony, but the I that witnesses these changes never changes. The I is perfect life. The I is the divine substance. The I is untouched by pain, decline, or disease. And so, instead of identifying with the appearance, I am sick, I am hurting, I am weak, let the recognition arise. The infinite life that I am cannot be ill. Then rest. Do not attempt to force healing. Do not attempt to visualize wholeness. Simply rest in the awareness that health is not something to achieve, but something to reveal. Healing occurs not when we fix the body, but when we cease to identify the body as our self. And as you continue this practice, you will notice a quiet shift. The fear surrounding symptoms begins to dissolve. The urgency to fix the body relaxes. And in that relaxation, the body often responds naturally, aligning with the harmony already present in the deeper I. Day 6, supply. I am is my source. On the 6th day, we address the area that burdens so many hearts' supply: money, livelihood, opportunity, security. The world teaches that supply comes from external channels, from employers, clients, investments, people, circumstances. And when we believe this, fear becomes our companion, for the world's channels are always changing. But Joel Goldsmith taught a profound truth. You do not live by effect, you live by source. And that source is not outside you, it is the I am of your being. Throughout this day, whenever thoughts of lack or fear arise, whenever you find yourself worrying about resources, pause and gently recognize, I am not sustained by the world. I am sustained by the infinite, not as a statement of hope, but as a recognition that the presence within you is the only real source of all that appears as supply. The forms change, jobs change, people change, circumstances shift, but the source never diminishes, never fails, never withholds. If a channel closes, give thanks. It only indicates that another channel, more aligned with your unfolding consciousness, is preparing to open. But do not look for the new channel. Look only to the source. When you rest in the I am, the right channels reveal themselves in ways you could not have planned. Let this day be one of inner abundance, not affirmations of abundance, but recognition that abundance is the nature of the infinite, expressing itself as you. You will find that as fear loosens its grip, ideas emerge, opportunities unfold, and supply flows without the strain that accompanies personal effort. Day 7. Guidance, the presence goes before me. On the 7th day, we turn to guidance, the quiet direction of life that emerges not from mental planning, but from the wisdom of the presence itself. The personal self is always trying to decide, to choose, to predict, to control. But the I that we have been resting in these past days does not plan. It unfolds. It reveals. It goes before us. Today, before any action, decision, or communication, pause. Let the mind grow still and gently acknowledge, the presence goes before me to make the way straight. This is not a request for guidance. We do not ask the infinite to do what it is already doing. This is a recognition that guidance is as natural as breathing, as effortless as the rising of the sun. It is the function of the I to reveal the next step, the next word, the next movement. You will notice that as you cultivate this awareness, decisions become easier, confusion begins to dissolve. The sense of having to figure things out diminishes. You find yourself moving with an ease that does not come from effort, but from trust. And in time, you will discover that the presence that goes before you also remains behind you, beside you, and within you, for it is your very self. This seventh day completes the movement that began when you first paused. In the pause, you stepped out of the personal sense of self. In the resting, you touched the infinite. In seeing others as I am, you dissolved separation. In health, supply, and guidance, you discovered that the presence governs all. Now, everything that unfolds is no longer lived by me, but by I am. As we bring these 7 days to a close, let us pause once more, not to end something, but to acknowledge that a new beginning is quietly unfolding within you. For the 7 practices we have taken together were never meant to be isolated exercises, performed for a time and then set aside. They were invitations, gentle openings that have begun to shift the center of your identity from the personal sense of self to the infinite I that has always been your true being. And when that shift begins, even faintly, life itself takes on an entirely different character. You may notice that fear no longer arises with the same authority it once held. The mind still produces its thoughts, its imaginings, its anxieties, but they pass through you more lightly, for you have discovered that the I which observes them is not disturbed by them. The body may still have its sensations, its rhythms, its changes, but you know now that the I is not in the body is in the I. Circumstances may still fluctuate, supply may still move through different channels, relationships may still evolve, but beneath it all, there is a growing awareness that your good does not come from the world. Your good comes from the presence. This is the quiet miracle of living as the I am, not that conditions suddenly become perfect, but that you are no longer conditioned by them. Something within you has stepped out of the dream of personal identity and into the light of spiritual identity. You begin to feel that your life is not something you must manage, control, defend, or improve. Rather, life becomes something that unfolds through you as the activity of the infinite. And in this unfolding, harmony appears not because you have achieved it, but because harmony is the nature of the presence when the personal self is no longer interfering. Do not expect to remain in this awareness every moment. Do not imagine that spiritual realization is a straight line, free of fluctuation. Even the greatest mystics had moments when the old sense of self attempted to reassert itself. But now you know the way back. With a single pause, with a single breath, you return to the truth. The I that I am is the presence of God. There may be days when you forget, then gently remember. There may be moments when fear arises, then quietly rest. There may be times when the world appears overwhelming. Then close your eyes, breathe, and return to the I that is never overwhelmed. Each return deepens the imprint of truth upon your consciousness. Each recognition draws you closer to the realization that the Christ, the I am, is the only life you have ever lived. Do not attempt to measure your progress by what happens externally. That is the old way. Instead, measure it by the inner sense of peace, the subtle quiet that begins to permeate your days, the gentle awareness that something greater than your personal self is living your life. When you sense that peace, even for a moment, you have touched the kingdom. And that moment is enough to change the trajectory of your spiritual journey forever. Let these 7 days be the foundation for a new way of living. Not striving, not seeking, not reaching outward for what already lies within, but resting in the truth that the I which hears these words is the I that Jesus declared to be the life, the light, the way, the I that is whole, the I that is supplied, the I that is guided, the I that is free. As you go forward, may each breath remind you, I am, not as a concept, not as an affirmation, but as the living presence that governs, sustains, and expresses as your very being. And in this recognition, let your life unfold quietly, naturally, effortlessly, as the activity of the infinite expressing through you